Bring it!
We're back to the utilitarian, descriptive. This is exactly what the episode contains. Shout out to our new patron. A.E. Marling came to us today, as a matter of fact, as we're just about to record. He created the Grixis Dragons deck and also the Blue-White Legendary deck. So those are very interesting decks that we have talked about in the past. He is an all-around good guy. Been a friend of the show on Twitter for a long time. So welcome. Reminder, all patrons now have Discord. So even the $1 patrons also have Discord. So come hang out. It's we've been getting a lot done, I would say, like, especially in the deck discussions, the card discussions. I mean, obviously, like, you know, we talk about other stuff as well, but like, I feel like we're starting to get to the point where we can really dig into a deck. If you're like, I have a deck that I want to work on, like, you can come into the Discord and be like, I'm working on this deck. Here's my 60. And the people there, obviously, like us included, but like the other people that are there are also have valuable input.
Yeah, I mean, you get enough people into a room, you start talking about brews, there's going to be a lot of valuable input there, right?
Yes.
And that we're finally getting to that point where it's like, wow, you can just like throw this 60 in there and you're going to get some good input now. Like, no matter who or when is, you know.
Yes, exactly. I did get, just before we started recording, as a matter of fact, got the final art for the very first new playmat / merch thing. It's going to get plastered on a ton of stuff. So keep an eye out for that. Patrons will get a discount on merch based on their pledge level. The amount that they've pledged so far. So if you have been like a day one $5 patron, then you're going to get a free playmat because you've been a day one, like you have contributed more than the value of the playmat. So as a thank you, you know, we're going to be dishing out the prizes.
Yeah, I was going to say, but I think that's actually really sweet. The art looks great. Happy to finally be able to get some licensed merch out there to the people supporting us. Indeed.
So the art is, as of right now, the art that we have is just of me, not just because like I'm an only child / egomaniac. But
also because you're a really good looking man, right?
Hey, what can I say? You know, like I'm at least in the top 2 for hosts of this cast, right? Like,
100%.
Right? Like, and that's a good place to be. Let me tell you. If I was number 3, then I would feel really bad about myself.
Yeah, that would be a big yikes.
Yeah, big yikes. Did I tell you I added a yikes command to the Twitch chat?
No, what?
Yep. Yeah. So if you type ! Yikes, the MTG bot will come back and go, big yikes.
Oh my god, that's bigger news than the playmat.
Disagree, but but the yikes command. There's also a yeet command just for the yeet squad out there, for the yeeters. You can also ! Yeet in the Twitch chat, and MTG bot will yeet back at you.
Okay.
So, anyways, so keep an eye out for that stuff. I'll be putting out some polls and like see what people want first. Obviously, like the playmat is like the slam dunk. I also want to like, in addition to that, I want to like reprint the classic playmat for people that like missed it the first time around, because the original run was like very small. I think it was like 25 maybe. And then we'll get some Zach stuff, and then sort of mix and match. I think, are you completely sold on the Teferi pose?
I don't know about that yet, but we're working on it.
Because
I do love me some Teferi. You're not wrong about that.
Like, the Teferi pose is super strong.
Oh,
That's a powerful. You have to be a powerful gentleman to make that pose work, which I think you could do. Just need to like really nail the photo reference.
It's fair.
We'll work on it. Bandit Restricted also came out today. No changes to any format. It's whatever. It's the middle of the season, right? Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah, there was never going to be changes to Legacy. Vintage, when there are changes, we probably wouldn't even talk about anyway. It's not a super popular format because it's just so hard to play. It's a weird time to ban for Modern right now, honestly. Like, it's middle of the PPTQ season. There's no giant Modern events coming up. I wouldn't be surprised to see changes in the future, like especially before the next Modern Pro Tour. I would expect to see changes somewhere between now and then, but as of right now, nothing pressing. It's not even like the preferred time to ban. They like to, like, given their options, they prefer to ban, right after a set came out, that announcement, or right before it comes out, I guess.
Right. Not
end of the season. This announcement is kind of reserved for emergency bans, and honestly, there probably could have been a standard banning, but standard's about to rotate in like 2 months, less than that, a month. So they just weren't going to ban anything there, and not shocked there's no changes.
Well, not only is it rotating, but they're also adding a set. Like, it's going to be very different. So it would be a lame duck banning at best. It would be like the Reflector Mage ban, right? Like,
yeah, and honestly, like, I think it'd be a terrible time to ban in standard because, like you said with the Reflector Mage ban, it got banned because one deck was too good, but then, that deck might not have been too good after rotation. Like, we kind of saw that last time when they banned Ferocidon, and it's like, well, now we're in the next format, you printed new cards, and Ferocidon doesn't look like it should be banned at all, so why is this card banned? And, they did it because it was a reaction to the old format and not as much we're getting ready for the new one. So I'm kind of glad they left it where it is, and we'll see how things shake out come, the next format. But we're not a standard podcast, so let's move on to what we think we would like to see in Modern, given the next change that happens.
Yes. I think it's time for Mox Opal. I think Mox Opal can safely go at this point. And like, because there is now like a very competitive alternative build of Affinity that does not rely on Mox Opal.
Well, it still kind of uses Mox Opal, but...
Well, it uses Mox Opal, but if Mox Opal went away...
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about Hardened Scales Affinity, and I agree with you. I actually think... I have been of the opinion for a while that Mox Opal leaving Affinity might be actually okay for the deck, more in the sense that once Mox Opal goes away, you'll see less artifact hate, so you're playing through, Stony Silence and like a deck with 4 Ancient Grudges in its sideboard less often. And obviously the deck gets worse. Mox Opal is an incredibly powerful Magic card, easily top 3 in Modern. But I think you can cut away the most powerful card, and then the deck loses some perception of its strength and ends up being better positioned in the format. I don't know if that would actually play out, but I think Affinity is strong enough that it could survive a Mox Opal ban. The issue is that Mox Opal, before, it was already really good to just get free acceleration on 1, or like turn 1 or 2 or whatever, but, that was always very good, but it was never, like, ridiculous. Like, Mox Opal is ridiculous when you are recycling it with Scrap Trawler, and it's making, 18 mana in a turn with KCI, where it's just way too good in that deck. And, I think you could kill KCI if you wanted to. You could easily just ban Karkline Ironworks, and the deck almost 100% goes away. But I don't know that we actually need to kill the deck. I just think it's too good when it has access to Mox Opal and Ancient Stirrings. And honestly, I think the deck would survive just fine without Ancient Stirrings.
Right. I don't think Ancient Stirrings would do, like, losing Ancient Stirrings would do enough.
Like, Ancient Stirrings is egregious as a card. Like, it's too good at what it does, but I think taking Ancient Stirrings away from KCI doesn't solve the problem, whereas that deck without a Mox Opal is still powerful. It can still do some very good things. It can still be a player. It doesn't really destroy the deck, but it is no longer just busted in half like it is right now. And I don't know. The one issue with banning Mox Opal is it is a very expensive card, so it would hit people in the wallets, which isn't great. So maybe they'll keep exploring stuff, but I don't know. The card has kind of just been on this watch list of cards that could be banned forever. So,
oh yeah, I mean we've literally been talking about this for years.
Yep.
And the problem is that, like, there was always something that needed to go first. There was always something more pressing.
Sure.
And I don't think there is anything more pressing currently.
Sure. And the other option we have in the current format is if we don't want to do bannings, I think it's time we could see some unbannings. These Mox Opal decks and Tron and, Humans, all these decks are getting to the point where they're just so powerful. They're just better than some of the cards that got banned. And we saw that with Jace and Bloodbraid, honestly, where, Bloodbraid came off, Jace came off. We didn't think we thought they were going to be busted at first, and then people play with them and they realized they're just kind of fine. It's turning out Jace is, well, initially it looked like Bloodbraid was a lot better than Jace, and now it's kind of gotten to the point where Bloodbraid's just another card in Modern. It's not too good. It's just literally just a card people play. And Jace is kind of creeping back up to being very strong, but I don't think the card Jace itself is very strong. It's just that it pairs really nice with Teferi, and, it kind of gave these blue decks, instead of just getting one powerful Planeswalker, they got two at once, which was, a little more than we necessarily wanted. But again, I think it'll be fine. I think it's time that we could see some cards come off because they were better when they got banned, and now they might just be acceptable in the format. So I don't know exactly what you would unban. I think there are a couple candidates, namely Birthing Pod, Splinter Twin, and Stoneforge Mystic. I think all could arguably be banned or unbanned at this point, and I don't know exactly which one you want to see unbanned. I would just unban all of them, honestly, myself, but I think that's not my job. I think R&D is the person or the team responsible for that, and I think they need to put in their testing and kind of figure it out because this is the format they control, and I really think you could unban anywhere from 1 to 3 of those cards and just kind of let people have their toys, because I do still feel like there are people that I know that play Modern that still feel kind of bad that they had their Splinter Twin deck banned or their Birthing Pod deck banned, and I still hear the cries when I go to F&M of, gosh, why can't I play with my card, And it's just like, if the card isn't egregious, like, I feel like they should be allowed to play with it. That's what this format's for.
Disagree. Like, Birthing Pod and Stoneforge Mystic are dangerous cards because they restrict future design space of, in Birthing Pod's case, creatures, in Stoneforge Mystic's case, equipment. So, like,
yeah,
those two cards from there's no advantage to bringing those cards back.
Well, the advantage is
and just having to reban them when a new thing gets printed, right? Like, what's worse?
I agree that could be bad, but
pulled the Band-Aid off, 2 years ago. Just let them go.
Look, Aaron, I agree that could be bad, but the thing is that people want to play with these cards. Like, they make this argument in Vintage. It's like they don't ban anything because people need a place to play with these cards, and it's like, people will tell me, like, well, you can't play Birthing Pod in Modern. You can go play it in Legacy. And the reality is you can't play Birthing Pod in Legacy. Nobody plays that card. It's not a real card there. And the green creature decks in Modern aren't even that good right now, to be quite honest. I mean, they exist, but they haven't put up results lately at all. In fact, the only creature deck we're really seeing right now are, graveyard-based decks, artifact-based opal decks, and humans. Those are like the only ones we see. And it's like providing an incentive to other creature decks to exist, I think, is good. Now, obviously, I'm a little scared of Devoted Druid, Vizier of Remedies, and Birthing Pod being legal, but I don't know that with Kolaghan's Command now being popular, with people already playing a bunch of artifact hate, and like incidental artifact hate, like at that, and cards like a Braid being legal. Like a Braid didn't exist before, and a Braid would be great versus a Birthing Pod deck. So I don't know. I think it was too good when it was banned, but I think the format again is a little different now. It's a little faster. The modern decks that exist are more tuned than they were when Birthing Pod was very popular, and I think that it might be time for it to come back. It could be dangerous and it could go bad, but again, like I know so many people that just love playing their green decks, and they just feel like they're kind of getting wronged that they can't play with this card they love. So,
they can. It is only preventing them from playing the card in sanctioned events. Played at home.
Well, but that is where people want to play the card, right? Like I want to go. Like a lot of people I know want to go to their local Grand Prix and play with the deck that they love. And yeah, I mean maybe players picking the game up now don't even know Birthing Pod. They don't have a particular affinity for the card, but again, like a lot of people love Splinter Twin. A lot of people love Birthing Pod. A lot of people felt really bad when they had these decks built and they got their cards banned and they had to sell off pieces at extremely discounted rates. So I don't know. Again, like it could be too much. They could be too good, but honestly, like with how Jace the Mind Sculptor and Bloodbraid Elf, kind of felt. Like we thought the unbanning was very dangerous at the time. I remember we had to do like an emergency podcast on how scary these things were, and realistically, they don't even really matter that much. I mean, they do, but
I think the difference is if that's the sort of line that we're taking, then by that logic, Stoneforge is at least worth a shot. But like we already know what the Splinter Twin Birthing Pod metagame looks like.
Well, we know what it looked like. We don't know what it looks like now. I mean, Humans wasn't a deck back then. KCI was kind of a deck, but it wasn't played. Jace the Mind Sculptor wasn't legal then, and I'm a little scared of Twin with Jace the Mind Sculptor in it, but I think that's something that I don't want to see that actually. I'm not super happy about that. But
no, Splinter Twin is never coming back.
I think Splinter Twin could come back at some future point. Like the thing is like when these cards are too good, like you're saying they restrict future design space, and like to some extent they do, but the point is like they shouldn't be printing really broken cards anyway. It's like, do you want to print like a one-man equipment with an equip for 0 that gives your creature +20/+20 or something? Like, no, that's ridiculous. Like you wouldn't do that. But like, having Stoneforge in the format isn't what's keeping him from printing it. It's the fact that that card is broken that's keeping him from printing it, right? And like part of the reason I think unbannings are okay is that as the format gets more powerful, it's good to add cards into the format that are like counter opposing forces to the power of other decks, right? So it's like, yes, these cards are powerful, but all they do is balance out the other decks. So I don't know. I think there's an argument to unban them. That is the move I would like to go at the next unbanning announcement, and I'm hoping to see some of it. Now I don't know what we'll see, and honestly, like if they don't unban it, I'm also fine with it. Like it's not hurting me that much, but at the same time, it's like I think at some point you can let these cards go and let them see what happens and let people play with their toys.
Like I said, I think there's 0% because nothing is going to change with Birthing Pod that's gonna make it okay. Like creatures are going to keep getting better. And
but
Birthing
the thing
Pod
that already
keep
changed
getting
is like the thing that already changed is that they printed answers to the card. Like when Birthing Pod was running rampant in the format, the most played like utility like answer spell was Abrupt Decay, and it was particularly egregious in that format that Birthing Pod cost 3 mana but had a CMC of 4. Like the Phyrexian mana really made that card degenerate, and honestly, like the fact that it has Phyrexian mana on it is a reason to keep it banned. But now, when people have access to cards like a Braid and Kolaghan's Command, the fact that you have cards that are already good against creatures decks, specifically little creature decks, where like Birthing Pod tends to be, that also answer Birthing Pod make the card seem a lot fairer. And Birthing Pod is not the type of card, like, it doesn't win the game on the spot. Like, when you play against Birthing Pod, the first activation is, it's good, generally. Like, when they build their deck, it's usually pretty good to sack off your Kitchen Finks, persist it, and get a 4-drop. Like, that's powerful, but you paid for to put the Birthing Pod on the table, you know? And it doesn't win the game on the spot, generally. I mean, it can, but you have to have already had, like, a pretty decent board or whatever. And a lot of Birthing Pod's power was that it was hard to answer, so it sat around for a little while. And, you know, when people have answers to the card, and when people are playing Storm now, they can just, you know, beat the deck without interacting with it. So, I don't know. I recognize that Birthing Pod is a dangerous card, and it's kind of scary, but at the same time, I do feel like the format's in a place where it wouldn't be horrible for it. I don't know.
You can't see the, like, smelling poop and puke face that I'm making right now, because there have been cold takes before. Like, the Mental Misstep take was pretty cold. Bring back Birthing Pod and Splinter Twin is absolute zero. It is literal heat death of the universe.
See,
the coldest take.
I don't agree with that at all, because I think what that would do is create a lot of hype around the format, because I still feel like there's a ton of Modern fans that feel like when those two cards got banned, the format they love got killed. And they kind of got alienated from the game, and I think it would create a lot of hype around the format, around what is already a popular format, to just introduce more elements that are competitive to it. And it's
people would come back and be like, oh my god, this format is a garbage fire, and then leave. And then the rest of us...
But, like, see, you don't know that, though. Like, you're telling me that it's a garbage fire, and the thing is that it might be. Like, you might be right, but it might not be. And, like, if you test, and, like, if R&D tests some games with it, and they realize that the deck is not actually just completely busted in the format, then I don't see any reason why it couldn't come back. Like, people were arguing before that, like, the reason you can't have Birthing Pod was it was too easy to get Siege Rhino with it, but, like, Siege Rhino hasn't seen play in Modern in multiple years at this point. Like, the card's not even relevant anymore. And yes, there are good cards you can get with it, but I think that, like, the better the format gets, the more tame Birthing Pod looks. And honestly, like, we don't even see green creature decks right now. Like, there just aren't very many competitive ones at all. Like, that archetype specifically could use a shot in the arm.
Birthing Pod enables combo decks, not creature decks.
Well, it enables creature combo decks. But it also just enabled fair decks. Like, the best Birthing Pod decks were... They did combo, but they played fair more often than not. And that is the type of game that we see a lot of decks in Modern employ anyway. Like,
you and I had a very different experience of Birthing Pod era Modern, because that literally never happened.
Oh, man.
Like,
yeah, my experience with Birthing Pod was they won with Gavany Township more than anything else. Like, that was always the best card in the deck, in my opinion.
They won with Gavany Township when they couldn't win any other way. Because, like, Plan A is, like, Spike Feeder Archangel of Thune. Or, like, Kiki Resto. Like, that's Plan A, is, like, combo you out as fast as possible.
Yeah,
and
but the thing is that those aren't even that fast in Birthing Pod right now. Like, those combos are like turn 5 kills in that deck, or turn 4, something like that. And it's like, Storm can kill you on turn 3. Like, humans can disrupt you enough, and, you know, Reflector Mage enough of your stuff that they can kill you on, like, turn 4 with disruption. And, you know, KCI, you know, you might have your Birthing Pod, oh, I've got you, I'm going to put you in this pod chain, and KCI just won't care and just kill you. Like, the deck never was very good at disrupting. That wasn't what it did the best.
So let me throw this at you. Felidar Guardian.
That card is good, but it doesn't have, like, one, it doesn't work that great with Birthing Pod in the sense that, like, you can't sack a Felidar Guardian, have it persist, and go get a Kiki Jiki. And two, the combo piece with it is Healy Rye, which you can't get with Birthing Pod at all. And it's, like, awkward color with it. Like, you got to play 4 colors for sure to make that happen, which, you know, makes you vulnerable to cards like Blood Moon in the format. So, again, like, yes, it could be good. Like, these could be good decks, but like, I want them to be good. Like, we want more competitive decks in the format at any given time. Like, that's what we want from the format. We want the format to be, 10 tier 1 decks. Like, that is awesome. People love Modern when it's like that. And
it's already 10 tier 1 decks. Like,
yeah,
there's
quickly becoming less than that.
Well, because it's not the two specific tier 1 decks that like a select number of people want. Like, that is not the utilitarian outcome of like unbanning Birthing Pod and Splinter Twin is not net positive. So there's no reason to do it.
See, I don't know that you can say that for sure, though. Like, I think that you think that they are like that, and I believe that you feel that way. But, like, again, I think what needs to happen is R&D needs to test these things. They need to, like, play a Birthing Pod deck that looks competitive against other Birthing Pod decks. Or, not Birthing Pod, other, like, competitive Modern decks. And honestly, if the deck is too good, then you don't unban it. And it's a simple thing to do. But, if it's not too good, I think people should be allowed to play with their toys. And, Wizards is starting to do this. In fact, I know they hired Tom Ross to kind of keep an eye on, eternal formats and to kind of look at, ban lists and stuff like that. So I don't know.
Yes, asterisk. Like, and don't get me wrong. Like, I believe in the boss 100%. Like, he's absolutely like a phenomenal player. Every interaction that I've ever had with him has been great. Like, I am a fan. You will not find any arguments against him as like a person that should be involved. The problem is that what you are talking about is essentially like 5 to 6 people's full-time job. And the only people, like those 5 to 6 people, they do not have, those resources don't exist. They can't dedicate people to like testing some stupid Birthing Pod deck so that like 100 people can be happy. That is not EV. That is not positive EV. It's banned. Leave it banned. Taking 5 people out of their regular job to test Birthing Pod decks for a week has so much more cost for a business than the remotest possibility of actual bottom line real world benefit, that there is no chance that they would ever do it, nor should they do it. In fact, it would be irresponsible business wise to make that decision.
See, I disagree with that strongly. And I think it's because you're missing the part where if more archetypes are viable that use a larger card pool, they can continue selling master sets, which have been one of the most successful things they've done in the last 6 to 7 years. It's been incredible for them. In fact, all of their best quarters in their company's last 5 to 6 years have all been during master sets releases. And that's partly because the master sets are good, but those are a limited time thing. They can't reprint the same cards into the ground and expect them to still be super positive because you run out of cards that need reprinting. And putting more archetypes into the format that use different cards actually let them make more money off of it, which to them makes sense. And they hired Tom Ross to do this. And honestly, like, I don't think it's that hard for him and like one other good player to sit down and play a bunch of decks and make an educated opinion on how good a card is. Like, I honestly think I could do that with another good player in a week. And like, if they're just giving him a week to do that, then let him make an opinion on it. And I think it's worth letting him do that. Like, it doesn't take that many games to see, what kind of power level this card is on. So it's not the obvious thing that's gonna break it, right? Like, because you're gonna go, okay, well, I'll put it in like the decks that have turned into like Eldritch Evolution has kind of stepped into some of those. Collected Companies kind of stepped into some of those. So then, like, you put it in those decks, and you're like, oh, this is slow and crappy. Like, it'll be fine. And then you put it out there, and it's like
it's like Sahili Feldar Guardian all over again. Nobody in the building saw that interaction. It was on Twitter for 10 minutes. And somebody was like, sweet, Splinter Twin's back in Standard.
Look, that's true, but that was before they had these people there. And honestly, like I wouldn't trust random person to make this, but this is like Tom Ross we're talking about. This guy has more SCG top 8s than any player alive, and he hasn't played in them in over a year. Like, I don't know, man. I would trust his opinion on this more than I would trust most people, and I think he could come to like a conclusion on that in a very short amount of time. And honestly, they've hired a lot of very, very good players recently that I think could help him assist making this opinion. You know, they've got, you know, Pro Tour mainstays like, well, I don't know if they're mainstays, but you know, they got Michael Majors there now. Donald Jones I think it's Jones. I don't know. I'm sorry. But regardless, like, I think they have the people there that they can do this testing now. And again, like, they do stand to gain from this. So I think it's worth them looking into. And like, my point is not that they should 100% do this. My point is that it needs to be considered. And if it's right, it should happen. Right. Like, I agree with you that, like, if it was too good, then there's no reason to unban it. But again, like, if they do the testing and it just seems like, oh wow, this deck is just, you know, it's good, but it's not dominate the format good. It's just like, you know, tier 2 to tier 1 good, then let it go. And like, honestly, like, we thought Jace was going to be way too good, and Jace wasn't way too good. So I think they have a little bit more leash on this than people perceive them having, I guess.
Like I said, I obviously, like, I have a much more like draconian view of like what the format should be. Because I think the format is at its best when it is curated. Like right now, like Tron is the best mid-range deck because the aggressive decks are so aggressive and the control decks are so controlling that if you're like, I want to play a turn 7 deck, that's Tron. And like, that's cuckoo bananas. Like, Tron shouldn't be the go-to choice for a mid-range deck in a format. That is ridiculous.
So what you're saying is you want to give mid-range decks more tools.
Birthing Pod does not enable mid-range decks. It enables degenerate combo decks.
Well, it enables mid-range decks too. I mean, that's the beauty of the card, is it enables both. Like, the best Birthing Pod deck, when it got banned, was a deck that just got Siege Rhinos and Restoration Angel to Siege Rhinos. Like, I don't know. I think the deck is good, but again, Birthing Pod's kind of slow. Like, Birthing Pod's not even that good against Tron. In fact, Tron was always a horrible matchup for Birthing Pod, especially when they printed Ugin. Like, have you tried playing Ugin or like your Birthing Pod deck against the card Ugin? It's ridiculous. Like, you have no chance.
Like I said, we do not need any more degenerate decks. We are at our limit. We're past our limit.
Okay, so then it sounds to me like you're good with Stoneforge coming back.
Sure, if that's what it'll take to shut people up, fine.
All right, good.
Have your stupid Stoneforge Mystic.
I actually think Birthing Pod's safer than Stoneforge at this moment. It's kind of scary. It's just my opinion,
yeah, like I said, it's. I mean, neither one. Like, the format doesn't need either one of them.
Yeah,
that's,
I mean,
right? Like, they don't.
I don't think
they don't
it needs
fill,
it.
They don't fill a void.
I'm not telling you that it needs to happen. I'm telling you that if the card doesn't need to be banned, it should be legal.
Team Unified Modern finalized prep questions. Take it away.
Okay, so I've had a few people come up to me and say, "Hey, Zach, what are we going to do with seat positions? You know, how do we set people up? Where do they sit? You know, does the archetype matter in its seat positioning?" And to be quite honest, no, none of that matters. It's all extremely random to the point where metagaming seat positions is not generally going to be very helpful for you. Like, if you were going to spend time thinking about where you're sitting, you should be spending that time thinking on your sideboard or, you know, your game plan for X matchup or whatever. So yeah, generally seat positioning does not matter. You can kind of just sit wherever you want. I would say you want to put the fastest and or most knowledgeable player in the middle. But outside of that, yeah, it doesn't really matter. The fastest player in the middle is nice just because they get to help the other two players when they're done. But yeah, I mean, you'll like set that stuff up and then the fastest player won't finish. They'll end up playing some grindy mirror match or whatever. And yeah, it really doesn't matter. Just sit wherever you feel comfortable sitting. You can decide in your team, and I promise you that's not going to be the thing that costs you your Grand Prix. So, yep, seat positions don't matter. I would say if you have your team set up now, the next question I'm getting is, what should we be doing? What should we be playing? And we kind of covered that last time, so I'm not going to go over, again, how you're picking the decks, but at this point, you need to consider the sideboards because, you kind of got your deck set, like, you're playing Burn, your friend's playing Infect, your other friend's playing Tron, or whatever. You got some setup there you're happy with. The next thing you need to do is really decide how you're going to build sideboards. And this is where I think the biggest change is going to happen for these formats is that you are not building the same stock sideboard that these lists had before, because you should be expecting a metagame that is slightly different than normal Modern would be, where you're not playing against as much random stuff, and you are instead playing against decks that everybody on the team agreed that person should play, if that makes sense. So the decks on the team are going to gear more towards tier 1 decks because people don't want to like disappoint their friends. They're more likely to play decks that are perceived as good, right? And then on top of that, from those decks that are perceived as good, there are going to be decks that are just overrepresented based on the fact that they use fewer cards that other decks use, like decks like Humans and blue-white control, and then there's generally going to be an Ancient Stirring deck, probably a Mox Opal deck, stuff like that. So once you know that those decks are going to be kind of overrepresented, you should slant your sideboards to be better against those decks. And every player on your team should do this. Now, I'm not saying drastically alter your sideboard. I'm not saying you want to play 12 Wraths in your sideboard because you expect a lot of Humans. But what I am saying is, maybe you were playing an extra Negate in your sideboard just because it was like very catch-all and you wanted it against a lot of the random stuff you played against. But really, it's like not that good against Humans or whatever. It actually is good against blue-white control and Ancient Stirring decks and a lot of Mox Opal decks too, but that's not the point. The point is, like, instead of playing the stuff that's just generally good because Modern's so diverse, you can play stuff that's a little more specialized. So maybe now, instead of, your catch-all spell, you have an extra Fatal Push in your sideboard because you want to beat Humans or whatever. So I think I would tune that. You definitely want to have everybody have some sort of artifact hate. There's going to generally be one artifact player on every team. So, having, like an Ancient Grudge in one sideboard, Ceremonious Rejection in another, and Stony Silence in another is great, or whatever, however you want to set that up. But just having ways to interact with artifacts in every sideboard is great. Having plans against a control deck in every sideboard is generally a good idea here. So I would slant a little more towards known archetypes than you would in just a regular field, I guess. And then the last note we have here is, now that you have your decks like set up and practicing, you want to practice post-board matchups against decks that are popular. So you really want to know your post-board matchup against Humans. You want to know your post-board matchup against blue-white / Jeskai control. You want to know your post-board matchup against Tron, KCI, Affinity, decks like that. And you can kind of cheat a little more against decks that aren't as popular. Like, I don't think it's that you really should not, honestly, you should not be practicing your post-board matchup against Mill. Like, that's not something you should be doing. And don't spend your time on that. Spend your time practicing against Humans and Control and, the decks we mentioned already. So that's kind of all we got for this now. We're going to finish up with that there. But I think that's kind of the last little push you need to get ready for the format. And, yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, so I mean, the post-board practice, I think, is the thing that will pay the most dividends, because people don't practice them enough, and they are different. Like, you are usually changing, even if you're just changing 4 cards, like, there are 4 cards that are so impactful that you took out 4 cards that you thought were good enough to play in game 1. So that should tell you something.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and the other thing too is like knowing your sideboarded games against these decks that you expect to play against is a really big deal. Especially like you know, if you're practicing post-board games and you're realizing, like, hey, I was a dog game 1, and, like, I'm winning post-board, but I'm not winning very much, so, like, the fact that I'm probably going to be down a game and I need to win both post-board games, you know, it can be kind of eye-opening. And again, this is the type of format where it's like, well, maybe instead of playing a negate, I'm going to play an extra Stony Silence. And, like, that Stony Silence can be so good in some matchups that it just wins you the game by itself. So, yeah, I mean, you really can have, like, the 0% or, like, the 0 to 10% game 1 and then actually be, like, favored by 80% game 2 in Modern if that's what you want to do. And this is the format where it rewards you for knowing when that's right, I guess.
Yes, that is true, except if you are playing Delver against Burn. You will lose.
Maybe. I think I could build a sideboard that would beat it.
Probably yes, and then you would lose to everything else.
I mean, that's true. But if you know that, like, Burn's going to be there a lot, then, like, maybe that's right. I don't know. Like,
could be. What
if your Delver deck had 4 Leyline of Sanctities and, I don't even know, 4 Life Goes On? Or whatever. Feed the clan. That's a card you could play.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
seems
it is. It seems loose.
Seems loose. I agree, but that is something you could do. I don't know. But anyway, enough on Team Unified. That's coming up. We got you the last points you need to build. That's something you guys can go and figure out for yourselves with your exact team configuration. It's kind of hard to give you exactly what you're supposed to do, but this is the best advice we have for just kind of general what you want to do for the tournament.
Yep.
But anyway, do you want to dive into this bug shadow deck you've been going on, Ahren?
I do. So I have been trying to find or fabricate or steal a modern Sultai deck basically for years now, and it just, like, it never quite gets there. And I thought that, like, Delirium was going to be the thing that, like, pushed it over, and, like, Grimflayer and all that stuff, and Traverse, and it still just didn't happen. And, you know, the frustrating thing about it, or one of the frustrating things about it, is you are playing all objectively powerful cards, and it just doesn't work. Like, all of those individually powerful cards do their powerful thing, but the way that they work together is not cohesive, and it doesn't turn into a strategy where you can be like, okay, here's my plan. Bang, 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 bang. Execute the plan, win the game. Like, sometimes you will just, like, out card quality your opponent, but I think it was at the time, like the last time that I really tried this in earnest, and it was true then, and I think it's way truer now. Other than sort of like dedicated combo decks that just play like a bunch of trash cards that happen to win the game when you play them all at the same time, I think the average card quality of a deck has gone up to the point where you can't just be like, here's my Liliana the Veil. It's a really great card. No, I'm going to slam this and beat you.
No, you're totally right. The format honestly used to be in a point where it was like, if you restricted people's resources enough through Thoughtseize and Liliana the Veil, you couldn't do anything better than Tarmogoyf when everybody was on very limited resources. Like, that just used to be the best thing you could do by miles, and it's just not the truth anymore.
Yeah. So that's kind of like one of the issues that I was having. And then I happened to last week, I don't remember even why. I think I just like opened up YouTube randomly, and there was a video, like league replay of Jim Davis playing Sultai midrange. And I was like, sweet. Like, this is great. I'm going to watch this. Like, maybe he cracked it open, right? It turns out, so it was a donation league. So somebody was like, here's my deck list. Here's some cash. go play it, and, you know, we'll see what happens. During the introduction, he is basically talking about why these decks typically, like, haven't risen to the top when, you know, sort of to just look at it, you would be like, oh, this deck should totally work. And the biggest thing, or one of the big things, is the tension between counter spells and discard spells is much more than I think people realize just looking at them as individual cards. You're like, and we've sort of touched on this in the past where we're like, when we had the whole, like, is Thoughtseize a counter spell discussion, right?
Yep, we had a full segment episode about tempo.
Yeah. And so that's like, that's the thing, because the deck itself needs to be proactive. And in order to do that and sort of maintain momentum, like not even necessarily like velocity, like we would think about it in terms of like a linear aggro deck where you're just like bang, 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 overwhelm, you know, your defenses, gotcha. It has to be, it has to maintain like a steady pace where like every turn you are moving your game plan forward. And like sometimes that happens quickly, and sometimes you're just like, play my Tarmogoyf, hold up Stubborn Denial, and like that is a strong advancement of your plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredibly tempo positive play, right?
So I said, because I had already been testing like branches of the deck, I had like a core that I felt was at least reasonable. Like it had the cards that I wanted to play. And so the old version was 18 lands, 2 baubles, 3 Stubborn Denial, 4 Thought Scour, and then a couple of Fatal Pushes, Dismember, and then 4 Thoughtseizes and Inquisition, and then 3 Rancors, 3 Traverse, Nameless Inversion, Snapcaster, Tarmogoyf, Abrupt Decay, and then the rest of the like shadow package, right? Like Street Wraith. And like this deck is fine, but it just wasn't, it was a good proof of concept, but in practice it didn't get there. And so my next sort of stage was, I was like, okay, I'm just going to play the like 4 of every single card that is the most impactful. So this was when I moved to 15 lands, because when half of your deck is redraws, 17 or 18 lands is too many. And that is a sentence that I never thought I was going to say. Like 18 lands is too many. Like 17 was too many. So like the super streamlined version was just all 4 ofs. 4 baubles, 4 Stubborn Denials, 4 Thought Scours, 4 Shadows, 4 Pushes, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Rancor, 4 Traverse, 4 Tarmogoyfs, 4 Street Wraiths, and then like Dismember, Pulse. This list has Apostle's Blessing in it, but that wouldn't have made the cut. And then yeah, like Dismember, Pulse, Nameless Inversion, and then a Tombstalker, because I couldn't beat flyers at all.
Sure.
And Tombstalker with a Rancor, that dude closes out games super fast.
I believe that.
Like that he's just so then I was like, after I heard that, I was like, okay, well, I sort of listened to Jim's thing, and I was like, what do I like, how do I take that away? Because it explained kind of the issue that I was having, which was like, Shockland Thoughtseize into, or like Fetch Shock Thoughtseize into like Fetch Shock Death Shadow was not great. And like, it sounds great and it should be great, but it isn't great unless your opponent is only playing one removal spell. And nobody is playing just one removal spell. So
sure. I mean, I think that play is always going to be great, the Fetch Shock Thoughtseize, but the thing is with it is that it's so good that the format kind of adapts around it, right?
Sure.
And that's been here for years. Like, people have been Thoughtseizing on one for a long time in Modern, and the decks that couldn't beat that aren't decks anymore.
Right. So I decided to just go all in. I was like, I'm cutting all of the discard from the 75. There are 0 discard spells in this list right now. And then I also have another version that's all discard and no counter spells, except for Stubborn Denial, because that card is just, or no, this one actually did cut Stubborn Denial. Wow. That's a super duper mistake. And it was a mistake. So like so now I have these 2 versions that I'm sort of testing, like A/B testing, right? Like the all counterspell version, the all discard version. And the all discard version was still doing powerful things, like Thoughtseize, Cycle Street Wraith, and then like turn 2 Delirium, like Whispers of Emrakul, Hymn to Turok you, is very strong. Like, I don't want to take anything away from that constellation of extremely powerful effects, but you get so mired in the tempo loss that your opponent can just play like an average game where they aren't doing those things and just playing like tempo neutral. They don't even have to be like trying to get ahead of you, and you're putting yourself so far behind that you can't catch up. So by the time you're like slamming your Tarmogoyfs and your huge Death Shadows, they already have their board built out. They've already executed their combo. They've already done whatever it is they're going to do. And unless you are going to go all in, right, and play 26 discard spells, you don't have enough discard to be able to successfully like turn that negative, that tempo loss into an advantage, or at least nullify it where it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that from the discard perspective. I think there's been this philosophy that Grixis Death Shadow has been employing for a while now, where they play a bunch of tempo negative spells like Thoughtseize and Inquisition, but they also play an incredibly tempo positive spell in Stubborn Denial. And Death Shadow is also a very tempo positive spell, where it's like it costs 1 mana, but you're getting like a 4 mana creature on the battlefield, something like that. It's like a, you know, like 1 mana 8/8s don't exist, but you could see like a 4 mana 8/8, like that could be a real card, right?
Sure.
So like you essentially get like, you spend 1 mana, you get like a 4 mana permanent. So they get that, and then on top of that, they will set it up where it's like, you know, you're playing against KCI, and you Thoughtseize a bunch of stuff, and you see they have a KCI in hand, and you don't take it, and then they're forced to play this KCI into your Stubborn Denial, and you get a very tempo positive play. You trade 1 mana for 4, right? So they've been doing that, but the problem is like that doesn't work against every deck. You can't always make Stubborn Denial trade with something very tempo positive. It only works against a select few, and when it doesn't work, it looks really bad.
Yes, it's more than you think, because even the like what appears from a straight like mana versus mana spent perspective to be neutral is in fact like potentially backbreaking. So like if I'm on the play and I just go like fetch land pass, and my opponent goes Plains Ether Vial, and I Stubborn Denial that can be absolutely game over right there, because their deck like, you don't love keeping one land Ether Vial, but you'll do it.
Well, in that scenario, it's like incredibly tempo positive, right? Because Ether Vial is worth more than 1 mana. Like,
sure,
the card itself to their deck can be worth like 9 mana, right? Like,
sure,
you tap it every turn for like 2 mana and 3 mana. Like, countering Soul Ring is generally a good idea.
But think about the other common turn 1 plays. So, there's like a discard, like Stubborn Denying your Inquisition of Kozilek is amazing.
I don't know about that. I wouldn't say it's amazing. Ancient Stirrings. Ancient Stirrings is a good one to counter. Stubborn Denying Inquisition can be good, but only if your hand is good.
Well, your hand is always good because you're only playing 15 lands. So like your whole deck, is gas. And the thing is, like, you will still, even if you close the game out on like turn 8, you will often have 5 lands in play.
Well, hold on. Let me say, I'm not arguing against your deck specifically. I'm just saying, like, the Death Shadow strategy of a bunch of discards and 1 Stubborn Denial isn't always great against the field right now because of decks like Humans and Affinity where they don't care if you Stubborn Denial something.
Sure. So, yes, Stubborn Denial against Humans, not ideal. That is, I will agree. Strong agree. If you can hit their Ether Vial, it feels great. Past that, it's not great. So the sort of evolution of the counterspell version to where I have it now, where I feel like it is probably within 2 to 3 cards of like what I would consider the optimized version, is 15 lands. 1, 2, 3. Actually, I ended up cutting some fetch lands because it was like I have so few mana producing lands that it was just kind of dopey to have like 1 million of them. So I'm on 7 fetches, 2, 4, 5 shocks, and then a swamp and 2 islands. There's a basic forest in the sideboard, and the reason that it is in the sideboard is because in the main deck, you will often have to keep like 1 land redraw and none of your redraws that don't cost you life. Like, you can't cycle an architect off of a forest. Sure. So it has to be, your first land has to be blue or black. So like if your opening hand is like keepable except you have your only land is basic forest, then you're just like forcing mulligans that you don't need to have. And also, even if you did keep that hand, your only turn 1 plays for green are traverse, and you do that sometimes where you'll like fetch, go get a breeding pool, and then traverse for a swamp. Like that's a very common play, but to just have you need to be able to have all 3 colors quickly, and basic forest can't do that for you.
Well, the other thing I really like about that mana base is that you are rarely going to traverse for a forest because you already have green if you're casting traverse, right? Presumably.
Right.
So yes. It's very unlikely that you need to traverse for a forest against anything except like a Blood Moon deck. Yes.
And we will come back to that. So 15 lands, 2 baubles, 4 Stubborn Denial, 4 Death Shadow, 4 Fatal Push, 3 Rancors turned out to be the correct choice because you don't want, like, 4 just was too many. Like 4 is too many, 2 is too few.
I don't know that 2 is too few. I think we could get to 2. I think we could make it happen.
Well, that was what I ended up with Bitter Blossom. So we'll get there in a second.
Okay, once you have Bitter Blossom, 3 Rancors is a lot better.
So 4 Traverse, and then 3 Mana Leak, 1 Snapcaster Mage, 2 Bitter Blossom, 1 Nameless Inversion, 4 Tarmogoyfs, 4 Architects of Will, 4 Street Wraiths, and then the one-ofs, 1 Engineered Explosives, 1 Dismember, 1 Soul Manipulation, which is a reader. I don't expect that people know this card. So Soul Manipulation is 1 blue-black. It is an instant, choose 1 or both, counter target creature spell, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So like the way that this often plays out or one of the issues that the deck has, because Stubborn Denial is such a sort of like core of it, is there are plenty of times when somebody's like Reflector Mage and you've got a Stubborn Denial in your hand. Like, that's actually why I have Mana Leak in there, because there are creatures that need to be countered. Follow up, there are creatures that you need a hard counter for. Like, Mana Leak your Wormcoil Engine very rarely happens, unless they just got super greedy and decided to slam it. Like, Soul Manipulation, counter your Wormcoil Engine, get back my Death Shadow, cast my Death Shadow is much better. And then Maelstrom Pulse and Putrefy.
I'm going to say, hold on, before you move past that, I like that you found a way to get Cryptic Command in this deck. That's beautiful.
I mean, it kind of is Cryptic Command, right? Like,
well, it's not in the sense that it's not great when you're behind, but the fact that you can almost always counter draw in this deck is wonderful. Like, you're playing Architects of Will and Street Wraith, you can like almost always return one of them and just draw a card off your counter spell, which is sweet.
So Putrefy is the other one of its 1 black-green, destroy target artifact or creature, can't be regenerated. The can't be regenerated is occasionally relevant. Being able to blow up an artifact in the main deck is super relevant. Also, having unconditional removal for any creature, relevant. Like, Dismember gets there most of the time. But like, game 1 versus like a primetime deck, Dismember feels terrible.
Yeah, it's not great.
So that's the main deck, and the Engineer Explosives was a late addition to the main deck. One of the things that Jim talks about in that sort of little intro deck is how great Engineer Explosives is, and I have found that to be the case. There were Abzan decks for a little while that were running 2 of them in the main, which I think is aggressive. I think they may have even gone up to 3 at some point, which I think is super duper aggressive. 1 feels great. I wouldn't be embarrassed to play 2. I just don't have the space because the deck is tight. That's the other thing. When you're playing 15 lands, there are very few things that can cost more than 1 or 2 that you can afford to put in your deck. And it's not like sometimes I hardcast Architects of Will. That is absolutely a scenario that happens like with some frequency, but it's not the plan. Like, I wouldn't play Cryptic Command in this deck. I wouldn't play a 4-mana Planeswalker. I would, like, that's not happening. So for any spell that you want to be able to cast reliably and reliably on curve, it needs to cost 1 or 2.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, when I looked at your list, my big concern was you had too many 3s. And I think EE is a good card, but my problem with that card has always been that it's too expensive, especially when you have options that can answer permanents in a more effective manner. I think it's a great card in this deck because you have like Tarmogoyf, but I hate EE in decks that play like 1 and 2 and 3 mana stuff. Now, the fact that you don't play any 3s makes it a little better. But again, it is pretty expensive. Like, if you are just, trying to kill like their Snapcaster and their Search for Azcanta, that's going to cost you 4 mana, which in this deck might very well be 2 turns worth of mana, which can be awkward. Right?
Yep. I mean, what it does much of the time is kill tokens and kill like birds and noble hierarchs and arbor elves. Like, honestly, like one of the things about it that has been surprisingly good is like being able to kill Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl at the same time just puts those decks on lock.
No, certainly that is good. I agree.
And that's not an effect that you would be able to get in another card for 3 mana.
Yes.
That I can think of off the top of my head.
It's true. No, you're right. Yeah, so my thing is that, like, I think this deck list looks very good to me. I'm pretty impressed with it. I just, again, when we were talking about it pre-show, I thought you just had a few too many spells that cost 3 mana or more, and I'm counting EE in that space. And you were saying you really like the Maelstrom Pulse, you like the EE, you like, you know, the Soul Manipulation, you like the Putrefy, you kind of like all of these cards, and I was kind of sitting there wondering, is there a way that we can kind of get the same effects, but just kind of reduce the mana cost? Because you're kind of in this, once you go towards the counterspell plan, you're kind of in this, I want to be very tempo positive direction, right? Like, that's where you decided the format's at. That's where you decided you want your deck to be. So why don't we try to maximize that even more by making our deck more tempo positive by, you know, playing spells that are generally more tempo positive? Like, Putrefy, while being very versatile, is generally going to be tempo negative in Modern, because you're generally going to have to kill, you know, like a meddling mage or a champion of the parish even, which is huge as down trading, and, you know, even just killing a Thalia that trades down quite a bit. I love Dismember in this deck. Having 1 mana removal spells is great. I get that you don't like the diminishing returns on that, so, you know, if you think 1's the right number, that might very well be it. But I think something people are underlooking in black decks right now is that Cast Down is a real card. It just got printed in Dominaria, but I think it's the best Doomblade in the format, and I don't think people play enough of it. So I'm wondering if we can get Putrefy into that slot. Maybe switch, like, you know, the Maelstrom Pulse and the Putrefy into a Cast Down and Abrupt Decay. I don't know if that's right, but that is worth exploring at the very least.
I think you need to have Pulse or Engineered Explosives.
Okay.
Because you will lose to Lingering Souls.
Look, I could be 100% convinced you're right on this. I think Pulse is a great Modern card. So if you've determined that that's the card you want, then I think that one's totally fine. I just think, you know, the amount you're playing is maybe too many. But one card I suggested that I think is amazing in this deck is Liliana Last Hope. And I thought that card was already very good when you rarely had creatures to get back. Like, just the plus and, like, getting to ultimate was good enough a lot of the time. But when you're playing Architects of Will and Street Wraith, her minus just gets so good. Like, her minus is always draw a card, and her plus is generally, like, you know, affect the board in a very real way. So, you know, I'm wondering if maybe we can just make the top end of your deck just the Liliana, and then you kind of get the, you know, the Planeswalker card type that you wanted for your Tarmogoyfs and your Traverses into your deck where you wouldn't have had it before. So I think that that might be something else to check out. I don't know. I think that's a good place to start exploring, though.
Yeah, I mean, I am not against, like, I love Last Hope, and the effect that you're talking about, where, like, recurring your cycling creatures is something that happens with Traverse, like, a non-zero amount of the time, right? Like, sometimes I'm just like, I need to lose 2 life to get my Death Shadow over the hump, so I will Traverse for Street Wraith and then cycle it. Great. Like, Traverse Snapcaster is a ridiculous interaction. Like, Traverse Snap Traverse is just value.
Yeah, it's a great way to get some bodies on the board when you didn't have
ridiculous
that, right?
Value. Did I talk about Bitter Blossom? I don't think I did. Did we even get to the 2s? Okay. So the rest of the 2s, Mana Leak, 2 Bitter Blossoms. 2 Bitter Blossoms used to be 3 Bitter Blossoms. 2 ended up being the correct number because, once again, with, like, a good chunk of the deck being redraws, having a card that you really only want 1 of in play at a time as a 3 of means that, like, often you will have 2 of them. And that has only ever been my game plan, I think, once, where I was like, I have to race this person, and the only way the math works out is if I end up at 1 life with them dead if they don't kill any of my fairies. Swing and hope.
Sure.
And I won that game, but that's not my main game plan. There's a lot of little things that are in the deck that are there to maximize Tarmogoyf that are very low, low cost. Nameless Inversion is definitely one of those things. It's Spatial Contortion, which is not an embarrassing spell to play in the first place. It has the tribal type, which grows your Tarmogoyfs. It's a one of, it kills Meddling Mage. It kills everything in humans. And, most of the small, early creature or small creature decks, it trades with most 2-mana creatures that are heavily played. So it's like I said, very, very low cost to include it, and the impact of it is very high. Architects of Will, like I said, does the same thing. And in this deck, Architects of Will with Tarmogoyf, I have played in decks where I couldn't cast Architects of Will and was fine with it. Because this deck can also cast Architects of Will, it has additional value because the ETB is Brainstorm without the card draw. You rearrange the top 3 and it's either player. So depending on where you are in the game,
that's a lot different than Brainstorm, but yeah.
Okay, sure. I couldn't. It was the only card that I could think of that does something.
Depths trigger.
Yeah, because that's definitely going to read. People are going to be like, "Oh yeah, the Halimar Depths trigger, modern staple, multi-format all-star Halimar Depths."
Hey, Halimar Depths is sweet, man.
Yes,
it taps for blue. It's great.
I'm sure in draft and block constructed, it was a all-star. So rearrange the top 3, and so with fetch lands, with all of those things, right? There's potential for powerful interaction there, and you can also just jam up your opponent. Oftentimes you will, if you're getting to the point where you're casting an Architects of Will, you probably just need one more turn, or 2 turns max. I had that situation come up. I was against Mardu Pyromancer, and I was at 1 life. I cast Architects of Will, and their top 3 cards were Pyromancer, Forked Bolt, Land. So I was Pyromancer on top, Land, and then Forked Bolt, because I knew I needed 2 turns. And they had the kill, but they didn't know it. And all they had to do was just hang loose for a turn until, they drew it. What happened was they drew the Pyromancer, they played the Pyromancer, they drew the fetch land, and then they cracked the fetch land and shuffled away the win and never had any idea. And that was a great feeling. I was just you had it. All you had to do was just wait. Just be patient. I mean, obviously they had no way of knowing that. But it does, one of the very few things that I like about casting blue cards is occasionally you get to feel sneaky. And that made me feel very sneaky. Plus, also the deck itself, I just want to point this out. The deck, when you lay it out, is gorgeous. It's such a cool looking collection of cards that is definitely a consideration. I'm glad that all of the cards work together, and I've spent a lot of time tuning the deck and getting it to a place that I'm happy with. But man, Mishra's Bauble is, the art is gorgeous. Stubborn Denial just looks cool. It's very evocative. Death Shadow, obviously classic. Fatal Push, I don't like the the skateboard guy, the falling skateboard guy versus like a guy getting kicked off a boat is kind of like, eh. I wish one of the arts for Fatal Push was the promo Walk the Plank.
Sure.
Because that art is great.
I promise you Fatal Push is coming back with more art in a Masters set soon.
I'm sure. Mana Leak, honestly, is one of the only cards that I'm not happy with in terms of art. There's never really been a printing of Mana Leak where like.
Well, that's because you're not playing the Chris Rush art. The Chris Rush art is so good.
Well, no, those are the ones that I have in paper.
They're so good.
But even that, I'm just kind of like, eh.
The guy's got his weird hat on. He looks so dirtily. It's awesome.
And even so, like my go-to right is the textless full art. So like I have the full art Nameless Inversion and the full art Putrefy, and those look dope. And like Bitter Blossom, obviously gorgeous. I have my Future Sight Tarmogoyfs. I have a regular Dismember, old Engineered Explosives, and then there are no promo versions of the other cards. Except I do have a Psionic Blast in the sideboard, and I have closed out a number of games with it, and it is great. I do have a full art promo Psionic Blast, and that card is beautiful. If you've never seen it, do yourself a favor, go find it. Gorgeous.
That's fair. I mean, that can come out of nowhere. I was actually playing a game yesterday against a Sultai deck that was kind of similar to this, although kind of different. And I look at someone I'm testing with, and I go, "We can go to 2, right? They're a Sultai deck. They have no reach." And he's like, "Yeah, just like tap out, go to 2. Like as long as they can't kill you with the attack this turn, you're gonna be good." I'm like, "All right, we'll do that." It's like we would have got worked by Psionic Blast right there.
Yep. Love that card. So when I started playing the matchups, I learned early that Plague Mare is like one of the best cards ever. Like it's just so good.
Yeah,
because
in the scenario where it's good, it's just backbreaking, right? And the fact that you can traverse for it, just having one copy is gorgeous.
Yeah. So like Plague Mare, Slam include. You will not be disappointed by that card unless you try and play it in an obviously incorrect way. So don't do that. The card will be great. I was getting wrecked so hard by flying creatures and flying tokens especially. And this is mainly before Bitter Blossom, but even so, like, you don't want to be using your tokens to block. You want to be using them to close the game out. So the best, like, hurricane type effect is, for this deck anyways, is Windstorm.
No, there's a better one.
Explain.
Look up Corrosive Gale.
Corrosive Gale. But it's sorcery.
Yeah, but it's Phyrexian mana. It's busted.
Sure. Okay, so the card that I'm talking about, Windstorm, is an instant. It's X green, and Windstorm deals X damage to each creature with flying. The card that Zach is talking about is X Phyrexian green, so you can pay 2 life instead of the green mana, and it's Corrosive Gale deals X damage to each creature with flying, but it's sorcery speed. The reason that I would try this.
I mean, you're a Death Shadow deck, dude. Just pay the life.
I understand. I would definitely try this in the world of I want everything to be as like instant speed, like proactive, tempo positive as it can possibly be. I think Windstorm still has the edge.
I think costing mana less is big on X spells, but
I mean, it's like wipe your board for 2, wipe your board for 1.
Yeah, I mean that can be like the difference between like, you know, wipe your board for 2 and then wipe your board and play a Death Shadow, right? Like I think it's a big deal.
All right. I mean, I'll give it a shot. I'm not like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm completely poo-pooing it. Like it's definitely worth trying.
Sure.
There are certainly decks that get out of hand in terms of going wide with creatures that do not die to Plague Mare. Bantu's Last Reckoning is the most efficient board wipe that you're going to find. Obviously, your lands don't untap isn't ideal. Flip side for this deck is
you can actually cast it.
Well, yes. Not only can you cast it, but like you have so many plays on one that like cast Bantu's Last Reckoning. Those 3 lands don't untap. You play 1 land, and you have like 3/4 of your deck that you can play. Like
sure.
on that single land. So the drawback is real. I don't want to minimize that, but when you have so many things that you can do at 1 mana, it's not that big a deal. And if you're staring down like a board full of humans, you'll take it. Trust me.
I still think it's worth trying Languish. Costing 1 more sucks for sure, but the fact that it's probably not going to kill your Tarmogoyf is interesting. It might just be too bad though against like Eldrazi. I don't know.
Yeah, like I wanted something unconditional.
That's fair.
So if I was going to go to 4 mana, I would just play Damnation. Single forest.
The not killing your own guys though is relevant. Like there are a lot of games where it's like I'm playing against Shadow and he didn't cast anything. Why? Oh, I'm not going to overextend, right? But it's like if you're like, turn 2 Tarmogoyf, turn 3 like Death Shadow, leave up Mana Leak, and you like Mana Leak their play or whatever. They're never going to be like, oh my god, he's got a sweeper. They'll just like play out all their stuff, and then you Languish them, and none of your guys died, which is sweet.
Sure. I mean, I've spent more resources on like a build your own Plague Wind, so I don't want like.
Sure.
I've definitely done that, so worth a shot. I was having a ton of problems with Titan Shift, and so I reached out to Mean Valakut Girl. I was like, how do I beat you? And she was like, Disdainful Stroke. And I was like, oh man, that makes total sense.
Yeah, Stroke's really good against that deck.
Counters everything that matters in that deck. And so I put it in, and I started beating them, and it's great.
Oh yeah, it's great when you have Snapcaster too. It's like they don't get to resolve anything.
So like
the sweet thing about Disdainful Stroke is it's always extremely tempo positive. It's like it can't be better. It's like double tempo positive every time because it costs 2 and it only casts stuff that costs 4 or more.
Yep. Yeah. So that like Disdainful Stroke is super legit. If you are playing a deck that has access to blue that is having trouble with those sort of like big mana type decks, Disdainful Stroke is absolutely worth a slot or 2 in my case. I have a Dispel in here. The Dispel is like comes in against control and also comes in against burn as just like a Hail Mary. The burn matchup is so bad, it's not even worth it. Like you just throw it away. Like sometimes you will beat them.
See, I don't know. I actually think your deck could beat burn. I think you got to play tight, but I think like lowering your curve is going to help a lot. And you have Shadow. Like Shadow is like honestly one of the best cards in the entire format against burn. And you have Stub, which is also very good against burn when you have Shadows. So
yeah,
I mean, you definitely need to draw well, but I think it's winnable.
Yeah, it's and I mean, I have won it, right? It's not like I'm 0% against them, but it's extremely difficult. You need to draw very well, and they need to draw like kind of poorly.
Sure.
Eidolon of the Great Revel is very hard to deal with. Like actually one of the ways that I have beaten them in the past is by casting multiple, like countering all their stuff and then casting Architects of Will through Eidolon of the Great Revel.
Sure.
And like that's a thing. And like, hey, I've hard cast some Street Wraiths before. I'm not happy about it unless I'm playing against like Jund or something.
Dude, don't lie. Anytime you hard cast a Street Wraith, you get happy about it. It's just the natural reaction. That's always so good.
Cool. No, it's really it is very cool.
Always so good.
I right. I have no complaints about that.
All right. Hey, so before we kind of finish the rest of this, I just wanted to get into a little debate about Thoughtseize. We were talking about this before the cast, and I kind of got in this argument with you that I think your deck should have Thoughtseize in the sideboard, and you were pretty adamant that it was wrong, and I kind of want to go over that. So why do you not think this deck should be playing Thoughtseize?
It's experiential, because it used to have four Thoughtseize in the side.
Sure.
Like for a long time, any build that didn't have 4 of them in the main deck, which was almost all of the early builds, had those 4 in the sideboard, and they came in, and they usually swapped out for like, I don't know, like Stubborn Denial usually, or something, like one of the 4 ofs, like you would just take it out. The problem that I kept running into is you would, like you lead on Thoughtseize, and you see their hand, and you only get to deal with one thing, and you have to deal with it at sorcery speed. You have just like, it takes a tremendous amount of resources in terms of like intangible resources, because you're taking your turn time, which generally speaking you don't want to do, because you do have the ability to play almost entirely, like aside from creatures, almost entirely at instant speed. Like all of your card draw happens at instant speed, all of your, the counter spells obviously. So the only things that you have to cast during your turn are creatures, Rancor, Traverse, and Bitter Blossom. And Maelstrom Pulse. 1 Maelstrom Pulse. Everything else, well, and Baubles, but I don't really count the Baubles because the draw happens the next turn.
Well, 0 mana. It doesn't matter when you play.
And 0 mana, right. So having to slow down for your interaction, especially like multiple times, was a hole that I couldn't dig my way out of. And there were no decks that I was going up against where they're like a single Thoughtseize was going to just completely bury them.
Sure. Well, I guess that's fair. No, that makes sense to me. My opinion is that I just think Thoughtseize is so good in these strategies that we need to get it in this sideboard. Now, I don't know what you'd cut exactly. I'm sure we could find some stuff, but Thoughtseize is just like, I don't know. The card itself is just really good. I mean, it's often referred to as the Force Will in Modern, right? And I think it's at one of the worst points it's ever been right now, specifically, where it's like, there are all these graveyard decks where Thoughtseize in them is horrible. Like, Thoughtseizing like Vengevine isn't going to get you very far. And there are a bunch of like Tron decks and Valakut decks that are kind of built to be resilient to Thoughtseize, and then the control decks like Blue-White aren't super bad against Thoughtseize because they have so much card draw, but I don't know, man. It just feels so wrong to not have Thoughtseize in this deck. Like, I think you're right in that it is very, it clashes very, very poorly with the rest of the deck, and that is definitely right. Where it's like you have a mana leak and a Thoughtseize, and it's turn 2. What are you gonna do? Yeah, I mean that's an issue. But I don't know. I think the more you play with the deck, you're gonna find you want access to Thoughtseize, especially like when you play against a deck that has like Cavern of Souls. Being proactive with your, resource trading game is just really important, and there are just spots where Thoughtseize is really good. So I don't know. I think the more we test with this, we're gonna find we want a couple Thoughtseize in the sideboard, but for now, I could definitely believe you that it's not right. I
think there has to be a creature that does that. Like I think that's a play that I would be willing to make. Where if there was something like a Lifebane zombie type effect that we could traverse for, I would feel better about that, because then we can spend the early turns doing the Stubborn Denial your turn 1 play, hold up Mana Leak for your second play, and then like snap Stubborn Denial and then just like build a board out and kill you. I think there's an argument there for once you have Delirium turned on, like they cast a Serum Visions or something, and then you go, oh, traverse, go get my thing, play it, check out your hand, what did you get, take that, and then continue the beating.
I guess that's fair. I mean, the other thing I like about it, though, is that you don't have that many sorceries in the deck. Like, getting sorcery in your graveyard is not trivial.
Sure.
So it's nice to, it's nice to actually diversify your sideboard permanents, which I think is something that is underutilized in these Delirium decks, is that they build their main deck all just Delirium-centric. I'm going to, diversify permanent types, and the sideboard is like 15 instants or something. Like, that's not that extreme, but they don't diversify the sideboard enough. And then post-board, it's like Delirium's a lot harder to achieve than you would think it would be. So,
sure.
I don't know. I think that's a place we need to explore more, but past that, I think you're doing good work with this. I have not seen very many just counterspell-heavy Sultai decks, and I think that's a good place to go. So, I'm happy that we got this far with it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's really, it was extremely counterintuitive for me to, one, play 15 lands, which is like inconceivable to, I think, to most people, right? Like, you would never be like, oh yeah, play 15 lands. Like, that is not a, like, even Delver decks don't run that lean.
No. I still think you should be at 16, but that's a small point.
Sure. And post-board, you can be at 16.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And that is, I also don't want to, like, poo-poo that point either. Like, sometimes that is relevant. Like, I'm not going to say, like, there aren't times when I'm like, oh, yes, I would absolutely like to have another land.
Sure.
Because I would, sure.
Well, and the land in the sideboard is an underutilized technique, so I like that. I like that you went that far.
Yeah, well, because, man, this deck, so, like, the stuff that is very difficult, so the stuff that the deck struggles with is Burn, Blood Moon. If you are playing against a deck that main decks Blood Moon, like, you basically have to respect it every turn that it's available for them to cast, because you're just stuck a lot of the time, because you're sort of like, you're fetch shocking proactively, and that leaves you more vulnerable to Blood Moon than like a normal deck.
Sure. So
that's something that's just sort of a byproduct. So Burn, Blood Moon. I don't think of stuff that also is like very difficult. Let me look at my spreadsheet.
I was gonna say, I think we kind of need to move on because we're already at like 45 minutes on this deck.
Losses. Eldrazi taxes. Oh boy, tough. Thalia decks tough. Making the mistake of doing too much damage to yourself against aggro decks.
Well, Thalia decks were always going to be tough for you, right? Because you were playing the more expensive spells, and you have a low land count, so it's hard for you to just like play through it.
Yeah.
But I think, like, once we get that curve down, the Thalia deck's going to be a lot better for you.
Yep. I could get behind that. So that's the kind of stuff that I would look out for. But like any of the slower decks, like, you can certainly ramp up your like damage output. I mean, I had games against Mill where they crypt incursioned and went up to like over 40 life, and I still won. So, like life gain is difficult asterisk. Like, if they're not putting a clock on you, you will win because you can easily have 30 power on the board. Oh yeah,
you're a shadow deck, man. You can smash people real quick.
So
that card doesn't generally need too much help closing.
It does not, but Rancor definitely does help.
Sure, I believe that.
So, all right. talk about your stuff. Oh, also, I think that card might be Thieving Sprite. Just FYI, the ETB discard.
Okay.
Thieving Sprite, two and a black, 1/1 flyer. ETB, player reveals X card from his or her hand, where X is the number of fairies you control. Conveniently, we are playing Bitter Blossom.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good with Bitter Blossom for sure.
So maybe that's something to look into.
No,
but
absolutely.
Anyways, carry on. So talk about your thing now.
All right. Yeah, so earlier in the week, I think actually last week, I was testing the standard Bant Nexus or Turbo Fog in standard with some of my friends. One of them was going to a Grand Prix. Wanted to see what the deck was about. It was all the talk at the Pro Tour. So he goes, so we tested it, and the deck was really impressive. We thought it was very good. And, he decided he wanted to play it. Didn't end up going to the Grand Prix, but we still thought the deck was very good. We were impressed with it. And then the next day, he actually just moved out towards where I live. He moved from across the other side of the state over here. And he goes, yeah, hey, man, I want to come to F&M tomorrow, but I don't really want to play anything. Do you have an extra deck for me? And I had a bunch of decks, because I just kind of do. And I was like, kind of just joking with him. I was like, yeah, here, I'll bring you Turbo Fog. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I built standard Turbo Fog. I'll bring it for you. And he goes, well, isn't it modern? And I go, yeah, but you can just play standard Turbo Fog. You just see how it goes. And he's like, dude, I know you have other decks. Just give me another deck. And so I was like, all right, fine. Give him another deck. And he comes out, we play, whatever. Have a fun time. Modern event's always great. But then the next day, I'm just sitting at work, and I was just thinking about it. I was like, man, we could have played Turbo Fog in Modern. There are some spells in Modern that are underplayed and people don't realize exist, but you can turn this Bant deck into just a straight blue-white deck with a lot of basics, because all the cards that you were playing green for in Standard exist in the color white in Modern. And it's like the reason you want to play blue-white is because Teferi is just so good. I mean, the deck does not work without Teferi. Teferi is the reason to play the deck. It's busted when they can't attack Teferi, and in Standard, it's worse because people play cards like Vraska's Contempt, right, and Hero's Downfall. Effects like that can just essentially kill a Teferi, just straight up. But in Modern, people don't play cards like that. There are sometimes like Detention Spheres, and there are like Karn minuses, but for the most part, very few decks actually play like a removal spell that straight up kills Planeswalkers. The most popular one that people play, like the common answer to Planeswalkers in Modern, is Lightning Bolt. And admittedly, Lightning Bolt is very good against Planeswalkers. Like, it's one of the things that's really keeping Jace in check. But it's not great against Teferi. You need two of them to kill Teferi, and you need them right now, because if you wait a little bit, he's going to get out of range. So, I was like, well, you know what? Maybe this is a thing. Let me build a list. I'm going to test this. So I built a list where I'm just literally copying the Standard deck. Just straight up copying it and kind of stealing a little bit from the Taking Turns Modern deck, like the mono blue one that plays all the Howling Minds and Exhaustion and Giga Drowse and stuff like that to just kind of stall and do some dirtily blue stuff. So I was like, let's see if we can combine them, because honestly, the most powerful part of the Standard deck is you get to this point where you just take all the turns with Nexus of Fate. And in Modern, it's a lot easier to get to that point because you have other really good Time Walks. Like, there is a Time Walk you can cast for 2 mana in Modern. It exists, and it's pretty good. It's called Temporal Mastery. You have to Miracle it, but when you Miracle it, it is not a reasonable Magic card at all. And there's also Time Warp in Modern, which, if you've ever played in Cube, you know is busted with Planeswalkers, especially when you have cards like Snapcaster or Eternal Witness to get it back, because it doesn't exile itself like all the other Time Walks do. So, in a deck that's playing Snapcaster Mage, you can get 2 Time Walks out of 1 card, which is just busted. And so I was like, well, let's see how this goes. So, kind of just straight up copying the deck. I added some other draw engines. I started out with As Foretold and Ancestral Vision. I was playing like Cryptic Command and a bunch of fogs from White. White actually had a surprising amount of very good fogs.
Not a sequence of words that you would normally hear.
No, I mean, that's true, but again, like...
Really, really good fogs.
Well, really, I mean, fog, it's like, I was originally inspired to start the list because I know that the card Ethereal Haze exists, because it was a big thing during Gifts Ungiven in Kamigawa Block Standard, which is a really random bit of knowledge to know, but I knew that. And I was like, well, maybe there's, more 1-mana fogs in white. Like, I can do this at 1 mana. That's probably better than, 2 mana, which is the best you get in Standard. And I was looking through it, and I was like, oh, you know what, there actually is another. There's a white card called Holy Day, which is 1 mana for fog. And I was like, all right, this is not that bad. I'm going to start with 8 of these. So I just played 8 fog effects, played a bunch of card draw, a bunch of time walks, and Teferi and Jace. And I was like, let's see how this works. And the other thing that the standard deck was doing that was really powerful is they're playing Gift of Paradise, which essentially makes a land tap for 2 mana. And that wouldn't be that good in the deck. I mean, it is ramp, which is nice, except you don't care about the ramp that much. The reason it's good is because you get to untap lands with Teferi, so untapping lands that tap for 2 is busted with that card.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the fact that Nexus of Fate is an instant puts you in points where you can essentially cast Nexus of Fate, this 7 mana time walk off of 2 lands, which makes it kind of feel like you're casting it for 2 mana, which is not okay when that happens, but it's part of what the deck is trying to do that's unfair and powerful. And there's not really a good ramp spell in blue-white, except there are lands that tap for 2 mana in blue-white. There's a card called Azorius Chancery, which is a I think original Ravnica bounce land, as you will, famous in the Titan, is it Amulet Titan deck, where they play a bunch of the bounce lands. Yeah.
Yes.
People
Azorius Chancery is not one of those.
No,
cards.
They don't play Azorius Chancery, but people know Simic Growth Chamber. They're familiar with that one generally.
Yes.
So I was playing the blue-white one to try and see if I could generate the busted board positions that the deck had with Teferi. And I played this deck through a league, and immediately we won 3'd and dropped from the league. And it didn't seem very successful, except when we were playing, it really felt like there was something there. The deck was doing powerful things. We won some games that just felt completely unfair, but it felt like the deck wasn't right. So we went back in the lab, kept tuning it, kept thinking about some stuff. We've decided that Azorius Chancery is too much of a liability. It's too bad against the card Field of Ruin, which is everywhere. We got really blown out by Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp was hitting that card a couple times, and that is a disaster, because when it comes back, you have to return a land to your hand. So, yeah, that's no bueno. So we cut that. We kind of cleaned it up. We've tried playing Mind Stone as the ramp spell instead, and Mind Stone's been actually very, very good. The fact that it's a ramp when you need ramp, and then it just becomes a card when you don't, is great. And we kind of tooled with the Fog package to kind of get it more towards what Modern wants. And White actually has a lot of fogs available to it. And we found Dawn Charm and another one called Angel Song that are both very good in the deck. And what happened was we started testing these different versions, and all of a sudden we figured out that Jason Teferi in a deck with Time Walks are just broken. They're super strong. And there's so many times where an opponent didn't know what we were doing and thought we were just a blue-white control deck because all they saw was Celestial Colonnade, Serum Vision, Suspend Ancestral Vision, stuff like that, go. And then you cast Time Warp and they never get another turn and they just lose, which is ridiculous. It's not a thing blue-white decks typically do. People don't play around it. And then we were also finding that they are just not... It's very hard for these aggro decks in Modern to beat the card Fog. It's way better against them than it looks. And
I used to play Fog when Infect was big.
Sure.
I used to play Fog in the sideboard. Talk about the sickest of blowouts.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, we played against Infect earlier, and it was I'm going to make this a 10-10 Glistener Elf attack you. You have 1 white up, and I'm holding up a Vines of the Vastwood still. And I'm like, all right, Fog you. And he's like, yeah. All right, no damage. And then, next turn, all right, become immense, mutagenic growth, attack you for 9 infect, 10 infect, whatever. All right, Fog you again. And then they have no cards in hand. They just got beat by the card Fog, which is wild. So yeah, we were testing with it, and it just turned out the deck was a lot better than we thought. And there are a bunch of decks that just, like I said before, struggle against Fog. Hollow One and Vengevine both have a really hard time with that card. And humans, while very disruptive, they can beat Fogs, aren't actually that great against it. It kind of takes the humans deck a little while to get rolling, and once it gets rolling, it feels like it's really hard to beat because they have all this power on the board, but they're not actually that disruptive when they don't have an Aether Vial. If they're just casting a freebooter, you just respond and cast Fog, and then you don't really have that much in your hand for them to take, and they can't attack your Teferi, And then next turn you get to draw 2 or 3 cards, maybe take an extra turn, draw 2 or 3 more, and you have another fog, and the next time they have a turn. It just like ends up playing out where it's a really hard matchup for humans. And we ended up finding out any deck that plays a lot of creatures just really struggles against this deck. So that your bad decks were decks that didn't play very many creatures, essentially decks like KCI, Storm, Tron, whatever. Any deck like that, these like kind of unfair, not creature-based decks. And conveniently, Dominaria printed the card Damping Sphere, which ended up being really, really good against all of them, and Damping Sphere does not hurt this deck at all. So you get to play sideboard Damping Spheres in it and completely hose the decks that are really good against you. We're playing 3 Damping Sphere, like you mean it, right? And the card doesn't hose you, but it really hoses them. And that was the other thing we found was absurdly powerful about this deck was you look like a fair deck and can play like a fair deck at times, but the cards people play that are supposed to hose decks like yours don't do anything against you. Your deck is not relying on the graveyard, so when people have Rest in Peace, it doesn't do anything. I've had people bring in Rest in Peace against me, and all it does is like stop you from flipping your Azcanta, but the card's still scrying. So it's like it already traded 1-for-1 with their Rest in Peace, but your card's scrying every turn, which is absurd, right? And like we're playing Mind Stones sometimes, like we keep going back and forth between it, but playing Mind Stones, and it's like I've had blue-white control opponents bring in Stony Silence against me and think that they're going to get me with it, and it's like, dude, I have 2 artifacts in my deck. What are you doing? Why is that card in your deck? You know? And then we get Damping Sphere, and it's like the unfair decks you play against never expect that out of you. They never think that like your unfair deck is going to bring in Damping Sphere against them. They think it's just like a race, right? So yeah, I've had this come up against Tron a lot, where you play a Damping Sphere and it slows them down, and they eventually get to the point where they like answer with an O-Stone, or they're like going to cast a big thing. But by that time, like this deck has accumulated enough resources that they'll like grind you out with Karn, and Ulamog plan just doesn't even work against you. And you just like take all you get to a point where you just take all the turns for the rest of the game. They don't get another turn, and they just lose to Teferi's Emblem. So the deck ended up being a lot more real than we thought it was going to be. I am really, really enjoying playing the deck. I think it's... I would not be shocked if this deck is like immediately a tier 2 deck in Modern. And even more than that, like once people find the right list, like this deck could easily be tier 1. I've been testing online with like normal blue-white control, and I've been playing this, and honestly I'm having more success with this Turbo Fog version right now, which is kind of scary. But it's the type of thing where it's like, you know, I'm getting a lot of informational advantage against my opponents, where it's like I know what's going on with their deck. They have no idea what I'm doing, and they make plays that are suboptimal and then lose because of it. So I think that's part of the situation, but at the same time, like that's the type of thing that can, you know, generate you wins in a format. So I'm going to play the deck this weekend in Baltimore. I am extremely excited about it. I don't know. I love this deck. It's so much fun. I think it has some issues still, and I don't actually own all the cards yet, so I'm hoping they come in the mail by the time I leave. But yeah, I don't know. I'm super excited about it. This deck is so much fun to play. It's doing some wild stuff. When you go off, the games are really fun, even though I'm sure it's not very fun for your opponent, but it's still like wild enough that they like are like still kind of into it. And then you also get these scenarios where it's like, you know, you go off and then all of a sudden they get another turn again, and they think they're like, oh my gosh, I get to do this. I'm going to get him here. And then you're just like, all right, go ahead in your upkeep, fog you. And you're like, oh shoot, all right, I don't actually get a turn.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm loving this deck. Hopefully it's as good as I think it is. It might not be. I don't know. It definitely has some issues. There are some matchups that are pretty bad. Like Burn is a disaster for this deck. I don't know how to beat Burn at all, but still working on it. Still going to test with it. Yeah, I don't know. I like the deck a lot, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm having a similar experience with this Bug Shadow list because it's doing what I want to do in a way that's powerful enough that it's competitive.
Sure.
So, you know, because I want to play interactive games. And so like this deck allows me to force people to be interactive, whether they want to or not, and still be able to win the game. Because I can certainly play a deck that forces you to interact and then has a hard time closing the game out.
Sure.
That is not this deck's problem. I have never had that issue, unless I really, really get jammed up on like ultra bad draws. I played a match against Mardu that I lost, and like we were both at 1 life, and it literally came down to like, can I top deck any removal spell to kill 1 lingering soul?
Sure.
And it was just like, it was so much fun. I guess the takeaway, or the thing that people should take from this is you can have fun and do well. I think that is something that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think people will play decks that, they're just playing tier 1 deck trying to win, and that works, and that can be fun. When you're winning, it is fun. But, when you're playing a deck you don't like because it's tier 1 and you're losing, it's miserable. And that happens in Modern. People will go to tournaments and they'll play deck, they think is good, but they don't love it. It's just the deck they think is good. And then they start 0-3 and it just is an awful weekend. It's like not a great way to spend a weekend. And, if you're going to go to a pro tour, maybe that's what you signed up for. But if you're just traveling, a couple hours to play in, a 50-person event or even a 100-person event or whatever, play something that you're going to enjoy. And honestly, like, me, Aaron, I'm the type of player that always wants to play interactive decks. I'm always playing a control deck, always playing, removal spells. I just love Jessica. That's been my favorite deck forever in Modern. And recently I was playing Blue Moon. I think that deck is also very good. Still pinnacle of interaction type deck. But this Turbo Fog deck is just so different. It's just such a different experience than anything I've ever done in Modern. And it's fun in the sense that, like, there's so many games that, like, feel like they should be games and just are not games at all. Where it's like your opponent is interested and they feel like they're playing, but there's nothing they're doing that's relevant in the game whatsoever. And I don't know, that might be a little sadistic, I guess, but it's I'm enjoying it for once in my life. It kind of feels like playing Tron. You're just like going over the top of everything, and just like nothing they do really matters that much.
Sure.
So,
I mean, you're describing the mindset of a Turbo Fog player. So yes, I believe you are having the experience as intended.
Sure, and it really is fun. I'm sure it'll lose its luster eventually, but for right now, I'm loving it. So,
yes.
I don't know, but that's all I got. That's all I got for this right now. If we actually do well, we'll put the list up. I'm sure I've posted on social media a couple times. I'll give out final lists after I'm, finally register it, but we'll see how it goes.
All right. I do want to burn through a couple of these questions from the internet. Somebody played an Ensnaring Bridge deck with Doran and a bunch of 0 power creatures and had a turn 3 kill with Tower Defense, which is a 1 green instant that gives all your creatures +0/+5.
Kudos to you,
is
sir.
dope. That is dope.
Yep.
Like Ensnaring Bridge with a bunch of 0 power creatures that hit with their butt is tremendous.
Yep.
Didn't even think of it. Vengevine is great. Confirmed great. Nimble Obstructionist also confirmed great. The Wizards deck is good.
I'm going to confirm Nimble Obstructionist is good.
Yes. Zach is not a believer in the Wizards deck. I am a believer in the Wizards deck.
No, I think the Wizards deck is good. Like, I just don't think it's as good as it looked. I think it can be well positioned, but I don't think it's actually great.
Sure. Someone on Twitter asked about 8-Rack's position in the metagame right now. It is rough, man. I will tell you. It's almost as bad as when I used to play Legacy Rackbox at my local store, and there were 3 people on Blackroad Reanimator. It's tough. It's Tuffy McTufferson.
Yeah.
You definitely need a splash color. White or green, both excellent. Red for Blood Moon is also fine. Blue is kind of meh. Main deck your Ensnaring Bridges. There have been points in the past where main deck Ensnaring Bridge was taken out for Bantu's Last Reckoning. I don't think you can do that anymore because the decks that are going to punish you for discarding their stuff are going to kill you so fast that it's not going to matter.
Well, and then like even if you Bantus them, it doesn't matter. Like, you want to Bantu the Vengevine deck, you're getting attacked for 8 next turn. Good luck.
Yeah. So definitely ensnaring bridge time. Mix up your wrath effects to play around meddling mage, and I wouldn't say no to at least one ratchet bomb, or maybe 2 even in the main deck. Sideboard, big haymaker kind of stuff. Torpor Orb, Leyline of the Void, Phyrexian Revoker for KCI and those kinds of decks. Like, combo, you're already favored, but Revoker has a lot of sort of splash hate against weird decks too. So I would probably dust him off. There you go. Boom. Look at that.
Did it, dude.
Look at that efficiency.
Boom. Hit him with the quick hitters.
Quick hits. So before we get to the Spice Rack, you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/turn1thoughtseize, all spelled out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at T1Thoughtseize, and Zach is at A22EN. You can watch a stream at twitch.tv/T1Thoughtseize, sponsored by our friends at Card Hoarder. You can see our YouTube videos at youtube.com/turn1thoughtseize, all spelled out. You can read my columns at blog.cardkingdom.com. You can become a member of the Thoughtseize Cabal at patreon.com/turn1thoughtseize, all spelled out. And, of course, you can see all of our content on turn1thoughtseize.com. The Spice Rack card this week is all you.
Yep.
So
this is
take it away.
This is the Turbo Fog Special. The card is Angel Song. It's all spelled out one word. I didn't think that's how it would be spelled upon first learning of it. But in Standard, they recently printed a card called Haze of Pollen. They printed this in Amonkhet, and it was like one of the very few cards in the entire set that had a 3-mana cycling cost, and I think that was an indication of Fog with cycling is a pretty unreasonable card, actually. Because Fog, when it's good, is really good, and when it's not good, it being another card is kind of outrageous. And it turns out White has a 2-mana Fog that cycles for just 2 instead of 3. And we put it in the deck and were immediately blown away with how good this card was in the deck. Obviously, there are times where Fog's not good, right? Where it's like, yeah, I'm playing against Tron. I don't really want to Fog them. I need something that's going to stop this Karn from eating all of my lands. Well, it's not great against Tron, but, you play against, like, blue-white control, and it's, like, the same thing. It's like, I don't need a Fog here. I need something to deal with Teferi or the Cryptic command they're casting, whatever. But when you can cycle it, it's great. And the fact that you can cycle it at instant speed to just be another card is also great. And the fact that you can cycle it at instant speed in a deck that's playing Temporal Mastery, which is a miracle spell, is kind of ridiculous. And we've had a number of blowouts already where it's like, you're playing against blue-white control, whatever, you cast your Serum Visions, you're like, oh man, there's a Temporal Mastery. Alright, put that on top. Go ahead with 4 mana up. And, they're on their turn, and they're like, alright, it's their turn 5, tap out, I'm going to cast Teferi, I'm going to plus it, I'm going to untap with this Mana Leak, and whatever they cast, I'm going to counter. It's going to be great. And you go, all right, in response to Teferi, cycle Angel Song. Oh, that's a Temporal Mastery. I get 2 turns in a row. And now they have 1 counter spell and they need to stop you for 2 turns, and that's generally a recipe for a defeat for them. So the card's been way better than I thought it would be. The other thing that's great about it is it's a Snapcaster Mage deck. So if you need to get deeper in your deck, you cycle the Angel Song. Later, you realize you need a Fog, and boom, you've got a Fog sitting in your graveyard ready to go from your Snapcaster. So it's really good. And the other thing, too, about that is, like, Fogs get better later in the game, right? Where it's, like, early in the game they have, like, 1 creature. They're attacking you for, like, 2 or 3 damage. And turn 3, they're attacking you for, like, 5 or 6, something like that, right? And so you can take a couple of those hits, and then they have, like, 14 power in play on turn 5, and you're at, like, 2 life. And you're like, oh, man, I really need a Fog now, right? And that's when they get good. So it's like you can cycle it early to hit your land drops, to find your, like, card draw effects that matter. Then late, it's sitting in your graveyard. And the other thing we found that was awesome about it, this is the last point on it, is that if it's the most played Fog in your deck, people are most likely to name it off of Meddling Mage, right? Where it's like the Fog are going to name the most. And if they named it off Meddling Mage, you can still just turn it into another card. It's great. So we found this is, like, one of the reasons this deck is even playable, is that Angel Song is a card. It's very good. And I've been really impressed with it. So, yep.
All right.
That's
good to know.
That's some sweet tech. I think you could throw that in decks that aren't Turbo Fog, and it's just, like,
Still good.
Yeah, I don't think it's... You kind of need a special deck for Fogs to be good, but Fogs can be, like, surprisingly very good. We actually found... We started the deck with Rest in Peace in our sideboard, and we were like, wow, we're this combo deck, we can play Rest in Peace. It just hoses our opponent, doesn't do anything to us. And then we realized every deck we wanted Rest in Peace against, that Fog was just better, so we're actually just playing another Fog in our sideboard instead of Rest in Peace, so...
Yeah. You should play Repel the Abominable.
I don't know what that one does.
You want to beat Valakut? They cast Scape Shift. They go get all their stuff. They put all the triggers on the stack. You cast Repel the Abominable. It's 1 white instant. Prevent all damage from non-human sources.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's actually pretty sweet. Maybe we have a Dawn Charm in the sideboard right now because it was also good against Storm, which is a matchup we wanted a little more help with.
Sure.
Well, it was okay against Storm. It countered Gifts, but it was also good against Burn. It was like something you could bring in to counter like a Skullcrack, which is surprisingly busted against your deck. The card Skullcrack is like unbeatable for you.
Right.
Yeah, so we were hoping we had Dawn Charms to kind of counter that effect. So I don't know. Repel the Abominable sounds sweet though. Worth trying for sure.
Yep. Prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by non-human sources. And Valakut is definitely not a human.
That's fair. I mean, that is relevant. That is worth trying.
So, there you go. Oh, God, I added something to the Turbo Fog deck.
Oh, heck yeah, dude. Thank you.
Ugh, I need to go take a shower. Woof. All right. That is quite enough of that. We will catch up with you next time.
Love you guys.